My SEL kept joking about my miscarriage until my husband heard her. My sister-in-law Rachel always resented that Kevin chose me, said she couldn't believe he picked someone so different from their family. We'd been married 3 years when I miscarried at 11 weeks. Already picked names, bought clothes. We were destroyed. Rachel acted supportive around Kevin, hugged me, said everything happens for a reason. But alone, completely different. First time, family barbecue. 2 weeks after, Kevin was grilling with his dad. At least now you know you can get pregnant. Maybe your body knew something was wrong with it. I was too shocked to respond. She patted my shoulder, walked away like she'd comforted me. Her birthday dinner. Kevin went to the bathroom. My friend had 3 miscarriages before a healthy baby. But she was younger than you. You're 32, right? Clock's ticking loud. Kevin returned. She immediately switched to discussing her job. It escalated. Articles about miscarriage statistics. Thought this might help you understand what went wrong. Comments on my posts. Wow, moving on fast. Telling family I seemed fine, probably wasn't that attached. Thanksgiving, she announced her pregnancy. Looked directly at me. Hopefully this baby will be the first grandchild that actually makes it. Silence. Kevin asked what she meant. She laughed, said she misspoke. He believed her. She always waited until Kevin wasn't there. Called me the almost mom. Asked if we'd accepted parenthood wasn't meant for us. Joked about not dealing with stretch marks. When we announced another pregnancy, Rachel's face fell. She recovered, hugged us. Privately told me, don't get too attached this time, just in case. She'd remind me anything could happen. Her friend felt great right before losing hers. Constant reminders about those first months. 12 weeks, healthy scan. Rachel, well, you made it further than last time. She bought a gift, but kept the receipt just in case. You know how these things go. I started avoiding family events. Kevin thought I was hormonal, paranoid. Said Rachel was being supportive, in her own way. Baby shower she insisted on throwing. Decorated with white balloons, privately told me they were for the angel baby. Gave us a memorial book for lost babies. Every mother should have one, just in case. 8 months pregnant. Rachel's house for dinner. Kevin outside fixing the car with their dad. Her husband upstairs with their kid. Rachel looked at my belly. Something could still go wrong. My friend's baby died at 36 weeks. Just stopped moving. Had to deliver knowing it was dead. That's worse than early miscarriage. At least you didn't deliver a dead baby. Some women aren't meant to be mothers. Maybe your body knows that. Maybe that's why it rejected the first. I started crying. She rolled her eyes. So sensitive. Just trying to prepare you for reality. Kevin walked in. Saw me crying. Rachel looking annoyed. What happened? Rachel. Hormonal moment about nothing. But Kevin had heard through the open window. Been listening 5 minutes. His face went white. What the hell is wrong with you? Rachel tried denying, but he'd heard it all. The dead baby comments. Body rejecting babies. Not meant to be a mother. I told him everything. Every comment over the past year. Every joke. Every dig. Kevin was furious. Told Rachel she was sick, banned until she got psychological help. Said someone who'd torture a woman about miscarriage was dangerous. I don't have a sister anymore. We left. Haven't spoken since. Our daughter's 6 months old. Rachel's never met her. Sends gifts we donate. Posts about being cut off for no reason. But yesterday changed everything. Kevin's mom called, crying. Rachel's in the hospital. What happened? She lost the baby. 34 weeks. Stillborn. My blood went cold. Not from sympathy. From fear. When? Yesterday morning. But honey, she's saying things. What things? She says you did something to her. Says you cursed her. That you made this happen. That's insane. She has screenshots, honey, of you visiting pregnancy loss forums, searching about herbs that cause miscarriage, looking up ways to curse someone's pregnancy. I never. The screenshots show your username, your email. I hung up, hands shaking, opened my laptop, logged into the forums I'd used after my miscarriage for support. There it was, my account, posts I'd never made, searches I'd never done, all dated from last month. Natural ways to cause miscarriage in others. Herbs to slip someone to lose pregnancy. Pregnancy revenge spells that work. My phone rang. Unknown number. This is Detective Jason. We need to speak about Rachel McNeil's stillbirth. I don't understand. She's provided evidence you threatened her pregnancy. We need you to come to the station. Another call coming in. Kevin. What did you do? His voice was ice. Nothing, I swear. Rachel's friend saw you at her house last week. You brought her tea. Special pregnancy tea, you said. But I hadn't been to Rachel's house. Haven't seen her in 6 months. Kevin, someone's setting me up. They found the tea. It tested positive for pennyroyal. It causes miscarriages. The line went dead. I sat frozen on my couch, staring at my phone where it had landed after slipping from my shaking hands. The screen was dark now, but Kevin's cold voice still echoed in my head. He actually thought I did this. My own husband believed I poisoned Rachel's tea, killed her baby. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I pressed them against my belly, feeling my daughter kick hard against my ribs like she could sense my panic. 6 months old already, growing strong inside me, and now someone was trying to take her away by destroying me first. Rachel had really done it. She'd found a way to hurt me worse than any cruel comment ever could. The forum posts were right there on my account. Searches I'd never made. Posts about herbs that cause miscarriages. How did she even get into my account? I tried to think back through the past month. Anytime my laptop was out of my sight, any moment Rachel could have accessed my passwords. But we hadn't been in the same room for 6 months. Not since Kevin banned her from our lives after hearing what she said to me at her house. The tea made no sense either. I hadn't been to Rachel's house. I hadn't seen her at all. But Kevin said Rachel's friend saw me there last week, bringing special pregnancy tea. Someone saw a pregnant woman at Rachel's door, and Rachel convinced them it was me. My phone buzzed on the floor. I couldn't make myself pick it up. What if it was the detective again, demanding I come to the station? What if it was Kevin calling back to say even worse things? The phone kept buzzing, vibrating against the hardwood floor. I finally grabbed it with shaking hands. Marlena's name flashed on the screen. My best friend. I answered and immediately started crying so hard I couldn't speak. She didn't ask questions, just said she was coming over right now and to lock the doors until she got there. 20 minutes later, Marlena let herself in with her spare key and found me still on the couch, sobbing into a throw pillow. She sat down next to me and pulled me into her arms, letting me cry against her shoulder. When I could finally breathe enough to talk, I told her everything. The call from Kevin's mom about Rachel losing her baby, the accusations about curses and poisoned tea, the fake forum posts on my account, Kevin believing I actually did this. Marlena's face went hard when I mentioned the police detective. She pulled out her phone immediately. You're not talking to anyone without a lawyer present. Not the police, not Kevin's family, not anyone. She started scrolling through contacts while I wiped my face with shaking hands. I know someone who handles criminal defense. Let me call her now. I watched Marlena make 3 different calls, her voice calm and professional even though I could see the anger in her eyes. She explained the situation to each lawyer, asking about their experience with false accusations. By the 3rd call, she'd found someone who could meet with us tomorrow morning. A defense attorney named Evelyn Ryder, who specialized in cases exactly like mine. People wrongly accused of crimes they didn't commit. The words felt surreal. Criminal defense. False accusations. Like I was living in some legal drama instead of my actual life. My baby kicked again, harder this time, and I rubbed the spot on my belly where her little foot pressed against my skin. Marlena hung up and turned to me. Pack a bag. You're staying at my place tonight. I started to protest, but she cut me off. Kevin thinks you poisoned his sister's tea. You can't stay here alone with him thinking that. What if he comes back? What if he's angrier than he sounded on the phone? She was right. I went to the bedroom and threw clothes into an overnight bag, hands still shaking so badly I could barely zip it closed. I grabbed my laptop too, the one with the fake forum posts that would either prove my innocence or condemn me. We drove to Marlena's apartment in silence. She kept glancing over at me like she was afraid I might fall apart completely. I probably looked like I was about to. My face felt swollen from crying. My eyes burned and my stomach was doing flips that had nothing to do with pregnancy. At her place, Marlena made me herbal tea and forced me to drink it, even though the irony of tea made me want to throw up. She sat across from me at her small kitchen table and made me go through everything again, taking notes this time. Every detail about my relationship with Rachel, every cruel comment over the past year, the 6 months of no contact since Kevin finally heard the truth. She wrote down dates and times, building a timeline of when I'd last seen Rachel, where I'd been over the past few weeks. Your phone will have location data, Marlena said, still writing. Credit cards will show where you've been shopping. If you weren't at Rachel's house, we can prove it. But what about the forum posts? What about the tea that tested positive for pennyroyal? Whatever that was. Someone had physically brought tea to Rachel's house. Someone who looked pregnant enough that the neighbor thought it was me. I barely slept that night on Marlena's couch. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's face when she announced her pregnancy at Thanksgiving, looking right at me while hoping her baby would be the first grandchild that actually made it. I saw Kevin's expression when he walked in and found me crying at Rachel's house 8 months ago. I heard his voice on the phone today, cold as ice, asking what I'd done. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. The forum was still there, my account still showing those horrible searches. I tried to figure out how to see where the posts came from, what computer they were made on, but I didn't know enough about technology. That's what the lawyer would need to figure out. That's what would prove I didn't do this. The next morning, Marlena drove me downtown to Evelyn Ryder's office. The building was tall and glass, the kind of place that probably cost hundreds of dollars an hour. I started to panic about money, but Marlena squeezed my hand. Don't worry about that right now. Just focus on telling her everything. Evelyn's office was on the 12th floor, decorated in calm blues and grays that probably helped anxious clients feel better. She stood up when we came in, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She shook both our hands and gestured for us to sit in the leather chairs across from her desk. I told her the whole story again, my voice steadier this time. Evelyn took notes on a yellow legal pad, asking specific questions about dates and times. She wanted to know exactly when I'd last seen Rachel, exactly what the detective had said on the phone, exactly what Kevin's mom had told me about the screenshots. When I got to the part about the pennyroyal tea, Evelyn's pen paused on the paper. "You've never purchased this herb? Never researched it?" I shook my head hard. "I don't even know what it is. The detective said it causes miscarriages, but I've never heard of it before yesterday." Evelyn made a note. "Pennyroyal is extremely dangerous for pregnant women. It can cause serious complications, even death. If Rachel consumed it, that's very concerning. But here's my question. How would you have obtained it if you never researched it? How would you know to use it?" I hadn't thought of that. If I'd never heard of pennyroyal before yesterday, how would I have known to buy it and bring it to Rachel? The logic didn't make sense. Evelyn saw the realization on my face and nodded. "That's the first hole in their case. The second is the witness who supposedly saw you at Rachel's house. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable, especially if the witness didn't know you well enough to be completely certain of identification." She flipped to a new page on her legal pad. "The forum posts are more concerning because they show your username and email. We need to determine if your account was compromised, if someone gained access to your login information. That's where digital forensics comes in." Marlena leaned forward. "Can you help her? Can you prove she didn't do this?" Evelyn's expression was serious but not unkind. "I can build a defense. I can investigate the evidence and find the holes in the prosecution's case. But I need you to be completely honest with me about everything. If there's anything you're not telling me, anything at all, I need to know now." I met her eyes. "I didn't do this. I haven't been near Rachel in 6 months. I didn't make those forum posts. I didn't bring her any tea. Someone is setting me up and I think it's Rachel herself." Evelyn studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, here's what we're going to do." Evelyn moved fast. Within an hour of our meeting, she'd already filed paperwork with the police department blocking any interrogation attempts until she was present as my legal representative. She explained that Detective Jason couldn't force me to come to the station for questioning, that I had the right to remain silent and the right to have an attorney present for any discussions. She requested copies of all evidence the police had collected, including the screenshots of the forum posts, the lab results from the tea, and any statements from witnesses. She wanted my phone records, my credit card statements, and security camera footage from my neighborhood to build a timeline of my whereabouts. "We're going to prove you weren't at Rachel's house," Evelyn said, making notes on a checklist. "We're going to show that your account was compromised and those forum posts didn't come from your devices, and we're going to find out where that tea really came from." Watching her work made me feel like maybe I could survive this. She was calm and professional, treating my nightmare like a puzzle she knew how to solve. She handed me her business card with her cell phone number written on the back. "Call me immediately if anyone tries to contact you about this case. Police, prosecutors, Rachel's family, anyone. Don't speak to them without me present." I took the card with shaking hands. What if Kevin calls? What if he wants to talk? Evelyn's expression softened slightly. "That's your decision. He's your husband. But I'd recommend keeping any conversations brief and not discussing the details of the case. Anything you say to him could potentially be used as evidence." The thought that my own husband might use my words against me made my stomach turn. Marlena drove me back to her apartment, both of us quiet in the car. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters or Kevin's family members. I ignored all of them. Back at the apartment, I tried to eat the sandwich Marlena made me but could only manage a few bites. My daughter was moving constantly now, like she could feel my stress. I rubbed my belly and whispered that everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. Kevin showed up at Marlena's apartment that evening. I heard his voice in the hallway, demanding to talk to me. Marlena opened the door but didn't let him in. "She has a lawyer now. You should talk to the lawyer." Kevin's voice rose. "She's my wife. I have a right to talk to my own wife." Through the doorway, I could see his face. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept either. Part of me wanted to run to him, to make him understand I didn't do this. But the bigger part remembered his voice on the phone yesterday, cold and accusing. I stood up and walked to the door. Marlena stepped aside reluctantly. Kevin's eyes found mine. "Is it true? Did you hire Evelyn Ryder?" I nodded. "I need a lawyer. The police think I killed Rachel's baby." His face twisted. "Did you?" The question hit me like a physical blow. After 3 years of marriage, after everything we'd been through together, he actually needed to ask. "No, I've never been to Rachel's house. I didn't make those forum posts. I didn't bring her any tea. Someone set me up and I think it was Rachel herself." Kevin shook his head. "Rachel just lost her baby. She's devastated. Why would she frame you?" I felt tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. "Because she's been trying to hurt me for over a year. Because she resented that you chose me. Because she wanted me to lose my baby too. And when that didn't happen, she found another way to destroy me." He looked at me like I was a stranger. "You sound paranoid. You sound exactly like Rachel said you would." That's when I knew. Rachel had been preparing him for this, probably for weeks, telling him I was paranoid, unstable, jealous, setting up the narrative so that when she made her accusations, he'd believe her instead of me. Get out, I said quietly. What? Kevin stepped forward, but I held up my hand. Get out. Don't come back until you can look at me without wondering if I'm a murderer. I saw doubt flicker in his eyes, saw him wanting to believe me, but it wasn't enough. The doubt was still there, poisoning everything between us. He left without another word. Marlena closed the door and locked it, then wrapped her arms around me while I finally let myself fall apart completely. 2 days later, Evelyn called with an update. Detective Jason had requested a voluntary interview with me, which she'd declined. I told him we need to see all the evidence first. I'm not letting you walk into an interrogation without knowing exactly what they have. She'd received some of the requested documents. My phone records showed I'd been at home and at doctor's appointments during the time the witness claimed to have seen me at Rachel's house. My credit card statements showed no purchases of herbs or tea. The phone records help, Evelyn said. But they're not conclusive because you could have driven there without using your phone. We need the security camera footage from your neighborhood to show your car never left. She'd also received the screenshots of the forum posts. I'm sending these to a digital forensics expert I work with, Jason Hansen. He's going to examine your devices and see if he can trace where these posts actually came from. The mention of examining my devices made me nervous even though I had nothing to hide. What if they found something I didn't know was there? What if Rachel had planted more evidence somehow? Evelyn must have heard the fear in my silence. Jason is on our side. He's looking for proof that your account was compromised, not trying to build a case against you. Trust the process. She paused. There's something else. Detective Jason mentioned that Rachel's witness is a neighbor who saw a pregnant woman at Rachel's door. The neighbor identified you from a photo Rachel showed her, but she admits she didn't see the woman's face clearly. That's the weakest part of their case. A pregnant woman. Not necessarily me, just someone who was pregnant. Rachel could have hired someone, I said. Someone who looked pregnant, or who actually was pregnant. She could have paid them to deliver the tea and then told her neighbor it was me. Evelyn made a note. That's a good theory. We need to find out who this witness is and exactly what she saw versus what Rachel told her she saw. After the call ended, I sat on Marlena's couch feeling slightly less hopeless than before. The case against me had holes. Big ones. I just needed to prove it before the police decided to arrest me anyway. Jason Hansen came to Marlena's apartment 3 days after I hired Evelyn. He was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with messy hair and glasses. He set up his equipment on the dining room table, connecting my laptop and phone to various cables and devices. I'm going to image your drives, he explained. That means I make a complete copy of everything on your devices so I can analyze them without changing anything. It preserves the evidence in case we need it for court. Court. The word made my hands shake. Jason worked for hours, typing commands I didn't understand, pulling up screens full of code. Marlena brought him coffee and snacks while I paced the small apartment, too anxious to sit still. Finally, Jason sat back and pulled off his glasses to clean them. Okay, here's what I found. My heart was pounding, so hard I could feel it in my throat. There's no trace of those forum posts on your laptop or phone, no browser history showing you visited those pages, no cookies or cached data, nothing. I felt dizzy with relief. So I didn't make them? Jason shook his head. You didn't make them from these devices, but the posts exist, so someone made them from somewhere. The screenshots Rachel provided show your username and email, which means someone either hacked your account or knew your login credentials. He pulled up a screen on his laptop. The good news is that forum posts like these leave digital footprints. The forum keeps logs of IP addresses, the unique identifiers that show what computer was used to access the site. I've requested those logs from the forum administrator. Evelyn had warned me this might take time, that forum administrators didn't always respond quickly to legal requests. But Jason smiled. I know the guy who runs this particular forum. We went to college together. He's sending me the access logs tonight. That night, I barely slept again. Every hour, I checked my phone to see if Jason had sent an update. Finally, at 2 a.m, an email came through. I opened it with shaking hands. The IP address traced to a public library computer 3 blocks from Rachel's house. Jason had the exact dates and times the forum posts were created, and he'd already contacted the library for their security camera footage. Libraries keep pretty good security footage because of theft issues, Jason explained over the phone the next morning. If someone used that computer on those specific dates and times, we'll be able to see who it was. 2 days later, the footage arrived. Jason called me to Evelyn's office to watch it together. My hands were shaking as we gathered around Evelyn's laptop. Jason pulled up the first video file, dated 3 weeks ago. The timestamp showed 2 p.m. The camera angle showed a row of public computers near the library's front windows. A woman sat down at computer number 7, the one that matched the IP address. Jason zoomed in on her face. It was Rachel. I felt like I couldn't breathe. There she was, heavily pregnant, typing on the library computer. Jason fast-forwarded through the footage, showing her spending 40 minutes at that computer before leaving. He pulled up the second video file, dated 2 weeks ago. Same computer. Same woman. Rachel again, this time spending an hour typing. The third file showed her there 5 days before her baby died. She framed me, I whispered. She literally sat at a public library computer and made fake forum posts on my account to make it look like I was researching how to kill her baby. Evelyn was already on her phone, calling Detective Jason. We have evidence that exonerates my client and implicates Rachel McNeil in fabricating evidence. I'm sending you the video files now. I watched Jason email the files to the detective while Evelyn explained what they showed. Rachel using a public computer to create fake forum posts. Rachel setting me up. Rachel destroying her own case by being caught on camera. When Evelyn hung up, she looked at me with something like satisfaction. Jason says the case against you is falling apart. But now he's very concerned about Rachel's mental state and where that tea actually came from. Because if Rachel framed me with the forum posts, maybe she'd also lied about the tea. Maybe she'd bought it herself, planted it in her own kitchen, and told the police I brought it. Maybe she'd done all of this to herself and her baby, just to destroy me. I spent the next 2 days waiting for Evelyn to call with updates about the witness. My phone stayed in my hand constantly, checking for messages every few minutes. Marlena brought groceries and made me eat soup even though I had no appetite. My baby kicked and rolled inside me, completely unaware that her mother might be arrested. The stress made my hands shake whenever I tried to hold anything. I couldn't sleep more than an hour at a time before waking up in a panic. When Evelyn finally called, I answered before the first ring finished. She told me to come to her office that afternoon because she'd tracked down Rachel's witness. The woman's name was Ariel Watts, and she lived 3 houses down from Rachel. Ariel had given a statement to Detective Jason saying she'd seen me at Rachel's front door last Tuesday afternoon carrying a gift bag. But when Evelyn questioned her more carefully, Ariel admitted she'd only seen a pregnant woman from behind. She never actually saw the woman's face clearly. Rachel had shown her my photo afterward and asked if that was who she'd seen, and Ariel had agreed because Rachel seemed so certain. I drove to Evelyn's office with Marlena because I couldn't trust myself behind the wheel alone. My blood pressure felt like it was pounding through my skull. Every red light made me want to scream because we were moving too slowly. When we finally got there, Evelyn had Ariel's new statement printed out and ready. Ariel now said she couldn't positively identify who she'd seen. The woman had dark hair like mine, was pregnant like me, but Ariel realized she'd let Rachel pressure her into making a false identification. She felt terrible about it and wanted to correct her mistake before an innocent person got charged with a crime. Evelyn sent the new statement to Detective Jason immediately. She told me this was huge because it destroyed Rachel's timeline completely. Without a witness placing me at Rachel's house, the entire tea story fell apart. The detective would have to question how Rachel even got the tea if I never brought it to her. Maybe Rachel had bought it herself. Maybe she'd planned this whole thing from the start. That same afternoon, Evelyn got a call from someone unexpected. Rachel's husband Vikram wanted to talk privately about his wife's behavior. He'd been finding disturbing things in their house and needed to show them to someone. Evelyn asked if I wanted to be present when he came in, and I said yes immediately. I needed to hear whatever he had to say. We waited in her conference room for 30 minutes until Vikram arrived looking exhausted and scared. He carried a cardboard box that he set on the table with shaking hands. Vikram opened the box and pulled out a black notebook. He said he'd found it hidden in Rachel's craft room behind boxes of yarn. It was her journal, and he'd read the whole thing last night. His voice cracked when he told us what was inside. Rachel had been writing about me for months, filling pages with fantasies about my baby dying. She'd written detailed scenarios about me having another miscarriage, about my baby being stillborn, about complications during delivery that would kill the baby or kill me. She'd written that I didn't deserve to be a mother after how easily I'd gotten pregnant while she'd suffered through years of fertility treatments and miscarriages. Evelyn took the journal and started reading through it while Vikram explained more. Rachel had been obsessed with my pregnancy since the day we'd announced it. She'd created a fake social media account to watch my posts without me knowing. She'd driven past our house multiple times just to see if she could spot me through the windows. She'd asked mutual friends questions about my due date and what names we'd picked. Vikram had noticed her strange behavior, but thought it was just grief over losing her own baby. He'd tried to get her to see a therapist, but she'd refused and said she was fine. The journal showed Rachel had been planning to frame me for months. She'd researched herbs that cause miscarriages and written down information about pennyroyal, black cohosh, and other dangerous plants. She'd created fake online accounts using variations of my email address. She'd practiced writing forum posts that would look like I'd written them. The whole frame-up had been carefully planned, not something she'd done impulsively after losing her baby. Vikram pulled out more evidence from the box. There were printed screenshots of pregnancy loss forums with my supposed username. There were handwritten notes about how to make the accusations look believable. And then he pulled out a receipt that made my stomach drop. It was from an herbal supplement website, dated 3 weeks before Rachel's stillbirth. She'd ordered pennyroyal tea herself. The receipt showed her name, her credit card, her home address. She'd bought the exact tea that she'd told police I'd brought to her house. Evelyn took photos of everything with her phone while asking Vikram questions. He explained that he'd found the receipt hidden in Rachel's craft supplies yesterday while looking for something else. When he'd confronted Rachel about it at the hospital, she'd started screaming that I'd somehow planted it there. She'd said I was trying to frame her now, that I was evil and dangerous. The nurses had to sedate her because she became so upset. Vikram realized then that his wife was having some kind of mental breakdown, and that everything she'd said about me was a lie. I sat there looking at the evidence spread across the conference table and felt like I couldn't breathe properly. Rachel had spent months planning to destroy my life. She'd bought the tea herself, planted it in her own kitchen, and told police I'd brought it. She'd created fake forum posts to make me look guilty. She'd pressured her neighbor into making a false identification. The entire accusation was premeditated psychological warfare designed to get me arrested for killing her baby. Evelyn called Detective Jason and told him to come to her office immediately. When he arrived an hour later, she presented him with Vikram's evidence and Ariel's corrected statement. The detective looked through everything carefully while we all waited in silence. He examined the journal pages showing Rachel's fantasies about my baby dying. He studied the receipt proving Rachel had bought the pennyroyal tea herself. He read through the notes showing she'd planned the frame-up for months. Detective Jason closed his notebook and looked at me directly. He said the investigation into me was officially closed. There was no evidence I'd done anything to cause Rachel's stillbirth because Rachel had fabricated all the evidence herself. However, he was now very concerned about Rachel's mental state and whether she might be a danger to herself or others. He would be opening a wellness check investigation and working with the hospital's psychiatric team to evaluate her. Evelyn asked what would happen to Rachel, and the detective explained that she'd likely be placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold. The evidence showed she was experiencing severe mental illness that had caused her to make false criminal accusations against a family member. She needed immediate professional help, not criminal prosecution. Vikram started crying when he heard this, saying he'd been terrified of his wife for weeks but hadn't known what to do. He loved Rachel but couldn't let her destroy an innocent person's life. Kevin called my phone while we were still in Evelyn's office. I didn't want to answer, but Evelyn nodded that I should. Kevin asked where I was, and I told him I was with my lawyer reviewing new evidence. He asked what evidence, and I said he needed to come to Evelyn's office right now if he wanted to know the truth about his sister. He arrived 20 minutes later looking defensive and angry. Evelyn handed Kevin the journal without saying anything. He started reading through the pages while standing in the middle of the conference room. I watched his face change as he read Rachel's detailed fantasies about my baby dying. His hands started shaking when he got to the pages where Rachel had planned out the frame-up step by step. He read about how she'd created fake forum posts, how she'd bought the pennyroyal tea herself, how she'd pressured Ariel into making a false identification. When he finished reading, he sat down hard in a chair and put his head in his hands. Kevin looked up at Vikram and asked if this was really Rachel's handwriting. Vikram nodded and said he'd watched Rachel write in that journal dozens of times. Kevin asked if the receipt was real, and Vikram showed him the credit card statement proving the purchase. Kevin's face went completely white as he realized his sister had tried to frame me for killing her baby. He'd believed her lies so easily, had accused me over the phone without even listening to my side. He'd chosen his sister over his wife when she'd needed him most. Evelyn showed Kevin the library security footage of Rachel creating the fake forum posts. She showed him Ariel's corrected statement admitting she'd never actually seen my face. She walked him through every piece of evidence proving the frame-up was premeditated and elaborate. Kevin started crying, and I felt nothing watching him break down. His apologies meant nothing right now because the damage was already done. He'd doubted me completely when I'd told him I was being set up. He'd hung up on me when I'd begged him to believe my innocence. Detective Jason told Kevin that Rachel would be involuntarily committed for psychiatric evaluation. She'd threatened to hurt herself when confronted with the evidence against her, and the hospital staff had determined she was a danger to herself. Vikram was filing for a temporary separation to protect himself while Rachel got treatment. The family would need to decide how to handle her long-term care once the doctors completed their evaluation. Kevin nodded but didn't say anything, still holding his sister's journal like he couldn't believe what he'd read. I left Evelyn's office with Marlena and went straight to my obstetrician's office for an emergency appointment. Dr. Dove took one look at me and brought me into an exam room immediately. She checked my blood pressure and her face got serious when she saw the numbers. It was dangerously high, much higher than it should be at 8 months pregnant. She asked about my stress levels, and I told her everything that had happened over the past week. The false accusations, the police investigation, my husband believing I'd poisoned his sister. Dr. Dove put me on modified bed rest right there in her office. She said this level of stress and anxiety could trigger preterm labor or cause other serious complications. My blood pressure needed to come down immediately, or she'd have to admit me to the hospital for monitoring. She prescribed medication and told me I couldn't go back to work or do anything strenuous. I needed to rest as much as possible and avoid any additional stress. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that Rachel's false accusation might actually harm my baby after all, just not in the way she'd planned. Marlena drove me home and helped me get settled on the couch with pillows and blankets. She brought me water and made me promise to call if I felt any contractions or unusual symptoms. Kevin tried to come inside when he saw Marlena's car in the driveway, but she blocked the door and told him I needed space right now. He could see me when I was ready, not before. I heard him arguing with her through the door, saying he was my husband and had a right to see me. Marlena told him he'd lost that right when he'd accused me of murder over the phone. I spent the rest of the day lying on the couch trying to calm down enough that my blood pressure would drop. My baby kicked constantly, and I kept my hands on my belly talking to her. I told her everything would be okay now, that the bad woman couldn't hurt us anymore. But I kept having panic attacks thinking about how close I'd come to being arrested. If Jason hadn't found that library footage, if Ariel hadn't corrected her statement, if Vikram hadn't found that journal, I might be sitting in jail right now waiting for trial. Rachel had almost succeeded in destroying my entire life. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Evelyn scheduled a meeting with the district attorney to make sure this nightmare was really over. She told me to come to her office first, so we could go over everything before we met with the DA. I took an Uber because Marlena had to work, and Kevin was still keeping his distance. The office building downtown felt cold and official, nothing like the cozy law firm I'd imagined. Evelyn met me in the lobby and walked me up to the 5th floor. Her heels clicked on the tile floor and I tried to match her confident stride, but my swollen ankles made it hard to keep up. The district attorney's office was all dark wood and leather chairs. The DA himself was a thin man in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. He shook my hand and gestured for me to sit down. Evelyn did most of the talking at first, laying out all the evidence that proved Rachel had fabricated everything. The library footage, the IP address traces, the journal Vikram had found. The DA listened carefully, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When Evelyn finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. He told us the case against me was completely without merit, and there would be no charges filed. Relief flooded through me so fast I felt dizzy. But then he kept talking. He explained that Rachel's mental illness made it very complicated to pursue criminal charges against her for the false accusation. She was currently in psychiatric care, and any prosecution would likely be delayed for months or even years while she underwent treatment. Even if they did charge her eventually, a jury would probably be sympathetic given her stillbirth and obvious mental breakdown. Justice felt slippery, like something I could see but couldn't quite grab. Evelyn asked about a civil lawsuit for defamation and emotional distress. The DA said that was our right, but warned it would be a long, expensive process with no guarantee of collecting any money even if we won. Rachel didn't have significant assets, and Vikram was divorcing her. I sat there feeling frustrated and cheated. Rachel had tried to destroy my entire life, and the best outcome was that nothing would happen to her at all. She'd get treatment and sympathy while I dealt with panic attacks and preeclampsia. The DA seemed to understand my disappointment. He told me he was sorry, that the system wasn't always fair, but at least I was cleared completely. Small comfort. We left his office and Evelyn bought me coffee at the shop downstairs. She reminded me that staying out of jail and keeping my baby safe was the real victory here. Everything else was just details. I knew she was right, but it still felt wrong. That afternoon, Kevin's father showed up at the hospital where I was still being monitored for my blood pressure. I hadn't expected to see him. He knocked softly on the doorframe and asked if he could come in. I nodded, too tired to send him away. He pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down heavily. His face looked older than I remembered, more lines around his eyes and mouth. He started talking before I could say anything. He apologized for not seeing how Rachel had treated me all these years. He admitted the whole family had made excuses for her difficult personality without recognizing she needed real mental health help. They'd called her intense and passionate when they should have called her cruel and unstable. He said he was ashamed of himself for not protecting me better. His voice cracked when he talked about how close they'd come to losing me and the baby because of Rachel's lies. I wanted to stay angry at him, but watching him cry made it harder. He told me about Rachel as a child, always jealous of her brother, always feeling like she wasn't good enough. Their parents had been strict and critical, especially with Rachel. She'd started showing signs of anxiety and depression in high school, but they'd dismissed it as teenage drama. When she had her first miscarriage years ago before she met Vikram, she'd fallen apart completely. They'd gotten her some therapy, but she'd quit after a few sessions, insisting she was fine. The family had believed her because it was easier than dealing with the truth. He understood that his acknowledgement didn't erase the betrayal. Nothing could give me back the peace of mind I'd lost or undo the trauma of being accused of murder while pregnant. But he wanted me to know he saw his mistakes clearly now. He promised to do better, to support me and Kevin and the baby however we needed. He asked if he could still be part of his grandchild's life. I told him yes, but things would be different now. He'd have to respect my boundaries and never make excuses for Rachel again. He agreed immediately, reaching over to squeeze my hand. After he left, I felt slightly less alone, but the anger was still there, sitting heavy in my chest. Doctor. Dove came in the next morning during her rounds. She checked my blood pressure and frowned at the numbers on the monitor. It was still too high despite the medication and bed rest. She sat on the edge of my bed and explained that we needed to talk about delivery. I was 37 weeks now, technically full term, and my preeclampsia was getting worse instead of better. The safest option was to induce labor within the next day or two. Fear shot through me. I wasn't ready. I was still processing everything that had happened, still having nightmares about police stations and jail cells. How could I bring a baby into the world when I felt this broken? Dr. Dove listened patiently while I tried to explain my fears. She reminded me gently that my baby's safety had to come first. If my blood pressure kept rising, I could have a seizure or stroke. The baby could be in danger too. She understood I was dealing with trauma, but waiting any longer was too risky. Kevin had been sitting quietly in the corner of the room. He came over and took my hand. He told me he'd be there through everything, that I didn't have to do this alone. I wanted to pull away from him, but I also desperately needed someone to hold on to. Dr. Dove gave us a few hours to think about it, but made it clear this wasn't really optional. She started me on medications to prepare my cervix and scheduled the induction for early the next morning. I spent the rest of the day trying to mentally prepare for labor, while also trying not to think about it at all. Marlena came by that evening with my hospital bag and some magazines. She painted my toenails blue because I couldn't reach them myself anymore. She told me I was the strongest person she knew and that I was going to get through this. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I appreciated her saying it. Labor started just after 6 in the morning when Dr. Dove broke my water. The contractions began as a dull ache in my lower back and quickly intensified into waves of pain that took my breath away. Kevin stayed right next to my bed, holding my hand through each contraction. The nurses came in and out, checking monitors and adjusting my IV. My blood pressure spiked with each contraction, setting off alarms that made everyone move faster. Hours passed in a blur of pain and exhaustion. I tried different positions, walked around the room when I could, used a birthing ball that the nurse brought in. Nothing made it better. By noon, I was only dilated to 4 centimeters and completely worn out. Dr. Dove suggested an epidural to help me relax and maybe bring my blood pressure down. I agreed immediately, too tired to care about my birth plan anymore. The anesthesiologist came in and placed the epidural while I curled forward over a pillow. Kevin held my shoulders steady and talked me through it. The relief was almost instant once the medication kicked in. I could still feel pressure, but the sharp pain was gone. I managed to sleep for a little while between checks, but labor dragged on for hours. My blood pressure kept spiking dangerously high despite the epidural and medication. Alarms kept going off. Dr. Dove looked more concerned each time she checked me. By 8 that night, I was finally at 10 centimeters and ready to push. Dr. Dove positioned herself at the end of the bed with 2 nurses. Kevin stayed up by my head, wiping my face with a cool cloth and encouraging me. Pushing was the hardest physical thing I'd ever done. My whole body shook with the effort. The monitors showed my blood pressure climbing to dangerous levels. Dr. Dove told me we needed to get the baby out quickly. I pushed through 3 contractions and felt something give way. One more push and suddenly there was a baby crying. A real live baby, and the nurses were placing her on my chest. She was tiny and perfect, covered in white stuff, screaming her head off. 6 pounds 2 ounces, Dr. Dove announced. A healthy baby girl. I started sobbing, overwhelmed with relief and love and gratitude. She was here. She was safe. Rachel's accusations hadn't won. Kevin was crying too, his tears dripping onto my shoulder as he leaned over to see our daughter. He kept apologizing, saying he was sorry for ever doubting me, sorry for not protecting me better. I couldn't fully process his words right then. All I could focus on was the warm weight of my baby on my chest, her tiny fingers curled against my skin. The nurses cleaned her up a little and helped her latch onto Nurse. She knew exactly what to do, rooting around until she found what she needed. I told Kevin we'd deal with our marriage later. Right now, I just wanted to focus on our baby girl. He nodded and kissed my forehead. For this one moment, everything else could wait. Carol showed up at the hospital the next afternoon. The nurses had moved me to a recovery room, and I was sitting up in bed with the baby sleeping in my arms. Carol knocked softly and peeked in, asking if it was okay to visit. I told her to come in. She walked over slowly, her eyes fixed on the baby. When she got close enough to really see her granddaughter's face, she broke down crying. I shifted the baby so Carol could hold her. She sat in the chair next to my bed and cradled her granddaughter like she was made of glass. She kept saying how beautiful she was, how perfect. Then she looked up at me with tears still running down her face. She told me she'd cut off all contact with Rachel until she completed serious psychiatric treatment and made real amends. Not just apologies, but genuine understanding of the damage she'd caused. Carol said the family was broken now, fractured in ways that might never fully heal, but she was choosing to protect me and the baby. That had to come first. I appreciated her saying it, but I also knew words were easy. Actions over time would show whether she meant it. Carol stayed for about an hour, holding the baby and asking questions about the delivery. She didn't mention Kevin or ask about our marriage, which I was grateful for. When she left, she hugged me carefully and promised to come back soon. I believed she would. A few days later, Evelyn called with an update about Rachel's psychiatric evaluation. The doctors at the facility had completed their assessment. Rachel was experiencing a full psychotic break that had been triggered by her stillbirth and made worse by years of untreated depression and anxiety. They found evidence in her medical history of previous mental health struggles that had never been properly addressed. The evaluation recommended long-term inpatient treatment at a specialized psychiatric facility, possibly for several months or even longer depending on her progress. The doctor said she needed intensive therapy and medication management before she could safely return to regular life. Evelyn also told me that Vikram was filing for a temporary separation. He needed to protect himself and focus on his own healing after everything that had happened. He was taking their son and moving in with his parents for a while. I felt a complicated mix of emotions hearing all this. Part of me was glad Rachel was finally getting help she clearly needed, but another part of me was still angry that she'd put me through hell before anyone took her mental illness seriously. Evelyn reminded me that Rachel's treatment wasn't about me. It was about preventing her from hurting herself or anyone else in the future. I understood that logically, but emotionally, it was harder to accept. Evelyn came to the hospital before I was discharged to help me file a restraining order against Rachel. We sat in my room with the baby sleeping in her bassinet while Evelyn explained the process. The order would remain in effect indefinitely, not just for a specific time period. Even if Rachel eventually recovered and completed treatment, she would never be allowed near me or my daughter without court supervision. She couldn't contact me directly, couldn't come to my house, couldn't show up at places she knew I'd be. Violating the order would result in immediate arrest. I signed all the paperwork while Kevin watched. The legal protection helped me feel slightly safer, like there was at least one barrier between Rachel and my family. But the emotional damage was still there, sitting like a weight in my chest. I still had nightmares about being arrested. Still panicked when my phone rang with an unknown number. The restraining order couldn't fix that. 2 weeks after I came home from the hospital, Kevin and I had our first couples counseling session. Marlena came over to watch the baby while we went. The therapist's office was in a small building near downtown, decorated with plants and soft lighting. The therapist herself was a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and a direct way of speaking. She didn't waste time with small talk. She asked us both why we were there and what we hoped to accomplish. Kevin started explaining about his sister's false accusations and how he'd believed the lies at first. The therapist stopped him and asked him why he'd believed Rachel over me. Kevin stammered, trying to explain that the evidence had seemed convincing. The therapist pushed harder. She wanted to know why he'd assumed I was guilty instead of assuming there had to be another explanation. Why his first instinct was to doubt his wife instead of defending her. Kevin didn't have a good answer. The therapist turned to me and asked how I felt about Kevin's initial reaction. I told her honestly that I felt betrayed. That after years of ignoring Rachel's cruelty toward me, he'd chosen to believe her accusations without even giving me a chance to defend myself. The therapist nodded and wrote something in her notes. She told us bluntly that rebuilding trust after this kind of betrayal would take serious work. Kevin needed to examine why he had consistently put his sister's feelings above his wife's well-being for years. Why he'd enabled Rachel's abuse by dismissing my concerns as paranoia or hormones. The session lasted an hour and left both of us emotionally drained. The therapist scheduled us for weekly appointments and gave Kevin homework to start thinking about his family patterns and how they'd affected our marriage. In the car ride home, Kevin was quiet. I could tell he was processing everything the therapist had said. I was too tired to talk about it more right then. At my 6-week postpartum checkup, my regular doctor referred me to a psychiatrist who specialized in postpartum mental health. The psychiatrist diagnosed me with postpartum PTSD related to both the false accusation and the traumatic delivery. She explained that the symptoms I was experiencing, the nightmares and panic attacks and hypervigilance, were all normal responses to severe trauma. She started me on medication and referred me to a therapist who could help me process everything that had happened. My new therapist helped me understand that healing wouldn't be a straight line. Some days I'd feel better, and other days I'd feel worse, and that was okay. She also told me it was completely normal to still feel angry at Kevin even while trying to repair our marriage. Those feelings didn't make me a bad person, or mean our marriage was doomed. They were just part of working through betrayal. Some days I could barely look at Kevin without feeling a surge of anger. Other days I felt grateful he was there helping with the baby. The therapist said both reactions were valid and I didn't have to rush myself into forgiveness. Marlena showed up at my door the following week with bags of food and a determined look on her face. She'd texted 3 friends who'd supported me through everything, asking them to come over for what she called a healing circle. I didn't want to see anyone, but she insisted that isolation was exactly what trauma wanted. The doorbell rang at 2 o'clock, and suddenly my living room filled with people who'd never doubted me for a second. They brought flowers and homemade cookies and genuine smiles that didn't have pity behind them. My daughter slept in her bassinet in the corner, completely unaware that these people had spent weeks defending her mother's name to anyone who would listen. We sat in my living room drinking tea while they shared stories about shutting down gossip at work and correcting family members who'd believed the accusations. One friend had actually confronted someone at the grocery store who was spreading rumors about me. Their loyalty felt like a warm blanket after months of being frozen out by Kevin's family. They didn't ask me to rehash what happened or share details I wasn't ready to discuss. They just sat with me, laughed at stupid jokes, and made me feel human again. When they left 3 hours later, I realized I'd gone the entire afternoon without that tight feeling in my chest. Being around people who'd never questioned my innocence reminded me that Rachel's poison hadn't infected everyone. That night, I asked Kevin to move into the guest room. He was folding laundry in our bedroom when I told him I needed space, that sharing a bed with someone who'd believed I was capable of killing a baby felt impossible right now. His face fell, but he didn't argue. He just nodded and started gathering his pillows. I watched him carry his things down the hall, feeling both relief and sadness. The therapist had warned us that rebuilding trust after betrayal this deep would require uncomfortable steps. Kevin needed to understand that his doubt had consequences, that saying sorry wasn't enough to erase what he'd done. He set up his belongings in the guest room quietly, then came back to kiss our daughter goodnight. When he looked at me, I saw genuine understanding in his eyes for the first time. He got it now. He'd chosen his sister over his wife when it mattered most, and that choice had fractured something fundamental between us. The physical separation within our home became a daily reminder that trust, once broken, required more than words to repair. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the psychiatric facility where Rachel was treated. The envelope had the hospital's logo in the corner, and my hands shook as I opened it. The letter explained that family therapy was an important component of Rachel's treatment program. They were reaching out to ask if I'd be willing to participate in sessions designed to facilitate healing and understanding. I read it twice, then immediately called Evelyn. She listened as I read the letter aloud, my voice getting angrier with each word. When I finished, she told me I had absolutely no obligation to participate in Rachel's recovery. My healing had to come first, and sitting in a room with the woman who'd tried to destroy my life wasn't something I needed to do for closure. I wrote a firm response declining the invitation, making it clear that while I hoped Rachel got the help she needed, I would not be part of her treatment process. Evelyn reviewed my response before I sent it, ensuring the language was professional but left no room for future requests. Mailing that letter felt empowering. I was setting boundaries that protected my own mental health instead of sacrificing myself for someone else's recovery. Dr. Dove scheduled weekly appointments to monitor me for postpartum depression, layered on top of the PTSD. She adjusted my medications carefully, watching for side effects while trying to find the right balance. Each week, she asked detailed questions about my mood, sleep patterns, and ability to bond with my daughter. I told her honestly that some days I felt okay, and other days I could barely function. She assured me this was normal given everything I'd been through. The medication helped take the edge off the constant anxiety, making it possible to get through days without panic attacks. Breastfeeding was going well despite all the stress, which Dr. Dove said was remarkable. My daughter was gaining weight perfectly, meeting every milestone, thriving despite the chaos that had surrounded her arrival. Holding her during feedings became my anchor point, a reminder that something good had come from all this pain. Dr. Dove praised my commitment to both therapy and medication, saying many women in my situation would have given up. But giving up wasn't an option when I had a daughter depending on me to heal. Kevin's father called and asked to meet me for coffee. I agreed reluctantly, unsure what he wanted to say. We met at a quiet cafe near my house and he got straight to the point. He wanted to pay for my therapy indefinitely, as long as I needed it. He said the family had enabled Rachel's behavior for years, making excuses for her cruelty and dismissing concerns about her mental health. His voice broke when he admitted they'd all failed me. The money for therapy was the least he could do to make amends. I accepted his offer because I genuinely needed the help, and because his accountability felt real. He wasn't making excuses or asking me to forgive anyone. He was simply taking responsibility for his part in creating an environment where Rachel's abuse could flourish unchecked. After that, he started visiting weekly to see his granddaughter. He'd sit on my couch holding her for hours, never once pressuring me about reconciling with Kevin or having contact with Rachel. His presence became a comfort, proof that not everyone in Kevin's family had failed me completely. 3 months after my daughter's birth, Vikram finalized his divorce from Rachel. A letter arrived from him a few days later, handwritten on plain paper. He apologized for not seeing the signs of her instability sooner, for not protecting me from her schemes. He thanked me for not pressing charges that could have complicated her treatment, acknowledging that I would have been justified in pursuing legal action. His honesty about his own failures struck me as genuine. He admitted he'd been so focused on supporting Rachel through her grief that he'd ignored warning signs of her deteriorating mental state. The letter didn't ask for forgiveness or make excuses. It simply acknowledged the truth of what had happened and his role in failing to stop it. I wrote back briefly, thanking him for his honesty and wishing him well in his own healing process. His willingness to take accountability, without demanding anything from me in return, helped me believe that some people genuinely learned from their mistakes. Evelyn kept me updated on Rachel's treatment progress through official channels. The psychiatric team reported she was making some progress in understanding her actions were wrong. But according to her doctors, she still wasn't fully grasping the severity of what she'd done to me. They estimated it might take years of intensive therapy for her to develop genuine empathy and remorse. The updates made me feel hollow rather than vindicated. I'd wanted to hear that Rachel finally understood the damage she'd caused, that she felt genuine guilt for trying to destroy an innocent person's life. Instead, I learned that even with professional help, she was still struggling to comprehend why her actions were so harmful. After a few months, I told Evelyn to stop sending me updates. Rachel's recovery wasn't my responsibility, and tracking her progress was keeping me tethered to trauma I needed to move past. Whether she ever truly understood what she'd done didn't change what had happened to me. Kevin completed an individual therapy program that focused specifically on family enmeshment and boundary setting. His therapist had identified that Kevin's inability to see Rachel's abuse stemmed from years of family patterns that prioritized keeping peace over protecting victims. When he finished the program, he wrote me a 10-page letter taking full accountability for enabling Rachel's cruelty and for believing her accusations without question. He detailed specific instances where he'd dismissed my concerns, minimized Rachel's behavior, or chosen his family's comfort over my well-being. The letter was thorough and painful to read. He didn't make excuses or try to explain away his failures. He simply owned them completely, acknowledging that his betrayal had damaged our marriage in ways that might never fully heal. I kept the letter in my nightstand drawer and read it sometimes when I was struggling to forgive him. The words were a start, evidence that he was doing real work to change. But words on paper couldn't erase the memory of his voice on the phone asking what I'd done, believing I was capable of murder. My daughter turned 4 months old, and I started sleeping through the night when she did. The PTSD symptoms were less intense with medication and therapy, though they hadn't disappeared completely. I still had panic attacks when I saw pregnant women who reminded me of Rachel. The sight of herbal tea in stores could trigger flashbacks to being accused of poisoning someone. But the episodes were less frequent and less severe than they'd been right after the accusations. My therapist said healing was happening slowly, that trauma recovery wasn't a straight line but a gradual process with setbacks and progress mixed together. I was learning to function around the damaged parts of myself rather than waiting to feel completely whole again. Some days I felt almost normal, able to enjoy my daughter and find moments of genuine happiness. Other days, the weight of everything that had happened crushed me, and I could barely get out of bed. But even on the worst days, I was moving forward instead of drowning. Our couples therapist suggested Kevin and I start having dinner together in the main part of the house instead of eating separately. She said rebuilding intimacy had to start with basic companionship and shared positive experiences. So we began sitting at the dining table together each evening after putting our daughter to bed. We talked about her development, the new sounds she was making, how she'd started reaching for toys. We avoided discussing Rachel or the accusations or anything related to the trauma. These conversations felt stiff and formal at first, like we were strangers making polite small talk. But gradually they became more natural. Kevin would tell me about something funny that happened at work, and I'd share a story about our daughter's day. We weren't rebuilding romance or passion. We were simply relearning how to exist in the same space without the weight of betrayal suffocating every interaction. The therapist called it laying a foundation, creating positive associations that could eventually support deeper emotional reconnection. Some nights I looked across the table at Kevin and felt a flicker of the love that had brought us together. Other nights I felt nothing but the echo of his doubt. But I kept showing up for dinner, kept trying, because our daughter deserved parents who at least attempted to rebuild what Rachel had tried to destroy. Carol called 2 weeks after our dinner conversation, her voice careful and hopeful. She wanted to throw a small party for my daughter's 6-month milestone. Nothing big, just close family who'd supported us through everything. I agreed, but made my boundaries clear right away. Rachel's name couldn't be mentioned, not once during the entire event. Only people who stood by me during the accusations could attend. Carol promised immediately, relief flooding her voice. She understood completely, and would respect every boundary I set. The party happened on a sunny Saturday afternoon in Carol's backyard. Balloons hung from the fence, pastel colors that made my daughter reach up with grabby hands. Carol had ordered a small cake decorated with butterflies. Nothing fancy but thoughtful. Kevin's father grilled burgers while Marlena helped set up presents on a folding table. My daughter sat in her bouncy seat, drooling on a teething ring and making happy gurgling sounds. Everyone took turns holding her, commenting on how much she'd grown, how alert she was becoming. Carol kept tearing up watching her granddaughter smile at people, finally getting to celebrate this baby properly. No drama erupted. No uncomfortable moments happened. No one brought up the accusations or the investigation or anything related to what we'd survived. Just normal family celebration, the kind I'd been afraid we'd never have again. Kevin stood beside me the whole time, his hand occasionally touching my lower back, checking in with looks to make sure I was okay. I found myself relaxing into the afternoon, actually enjoying watching my daughter experience her first real party. When we left, Carol hugged me tight and thanked me for trusting her with this. The party felt like genuine progress, like maybe we were building something healthier than what existed before. That night after putting our daughter to bed, Kevin stood in the hallway between our bedroom and the guest room where he'd been sleeping for months. He asked quietly if he could move back into our bedroom. His voice held no expectation, no pressure. I looked at him standing there in his pajamas, waiting for my answer without trying to convince me or argue his case. I told him I wasn't ready yet. The words came out firm, but not angry. He nodded immediately, said he understood completely, kissed my forehead, and walked back to the guest room without another word. No guilt trip, no wounded expression, just acceptance of my timeline. Our next therapy session, I mentioned the conversation to our counselor. She validated my decision immediately, explaining that I got to set the pace for physical reconciliation. Kevin needed to respect that without building resentment, and so far he was doing exactly what healthy rebuilding required. The validation helped me feel less guilty about keeping him at arm's length. Some nights I wanted him back in our bed. Other nights I needed the space to process everything without his presence reminding me of his doubt. Both feelings were okay, and I didn't have to rush either one. 3 weeks later, I attended my first meeting of a support group I'd found online for women falsely accused of crimes. 7 of us gathered in a community center basement, sitting in a circle of folding chairs under fluorescent lights. Each woman shared her story. One had been accused of embezzlement by a vengeful coworker. Another faced assault charges from an ex who wanted custody of their kids. A third was accused of elder abuse by family members fighting over inheritance. Listening to their experiences, I felt something unlock in my chest. These women understood the specific trauma of having your innocence questioned, of watching people doubt you, of fighting to prove something that should never need proving. When my turn came, I told them everything about Rachel's frame-up, the pennyroyal tea, Kevin's initial belief in his sister's lies. They nodded throughout, recognizing the patterns of false accusation and manipulation. After the meeting, 3 women came up to hug me, saying my story gave them hope that vindication was possible. I started attending every week, finding connection with people who got it in ways my other friends couldn't. Sharing my experience in that circle helped me process what I'd survived, gave meaning to the nightmare by letting me help others navigate similar trauma. The group became an important part of my healing, a place where I didn't have to explain or justify my ongoing fear and anger. Evelyn called me 6 months after Rachel's hospitalization with an update I hadn't asked for. Rachel was transferred to a less intensive outpatient program. Her doctors reported she was stable on medication and no longer experiencing psychotic symptoms. They considered her mental break contained and manageable with continued treatment. Evelyn asked if I wanted to modify the restraining order given Rachel's improved condition. I said no immediately, my voice harder than I expected. Keep the order exactly as it was. Monitor any attempts at contact and notify me only if Rachel violated the boundaries. I didn't want updates on her progress or her recovery or her treatment milestones. Her mental health wasn't my responsibility or my concern. Evelyn agreed without question, making notes to maintain all protective measures indefinitely. After hanging up, I sat with my daughter on my lap, watching her play with a rattle. Rachel's recovery meant nothing to me. She could get completely better or stay broken forever. Either way, she'd never be part of our lives again. That realization brought relief rather than guilt. I'd stopped caring about her well-being the moment she tried to destroy mine. Kevin suggested a weekend trip to the beach when our daughter turned 7 months old. Our first family vacation. Just the 3 of us getting away from the house where so much pain had happened. I hesitated at first, worried about traveling with a baby, about spending that much concentrated time with Kevin. But Marlena encouraged me to go, said sometimes physical distance from trauma locations helped healing happen faster. We drove 3 hours to a small coastal town, stayed in a beach cottage with blue shutters and a porch swing. Kevin was attentive and patient the entire weekend, never pushing for more than I was willing to give. He changed diapers without being asked, took night feeding shifts, carried our daughter down to the beach in the morning so I could sleep an extra hour. We walked along the shore with her in a carrier against Kevin's chest, her tiny sun hat flopping in the breeze. I caught myself laughing at something stupid he said about the seagulls, genuine laughter that surprised me with its ease. That night, after putting our daughter to bed, we sat on the porch drinking wine and listening to the ocean. Kevin didn't try to rehash the past or push for reconciliation talks, just sat beside me in comfortable silence. I realized sitting there that I was starting to forgive him. Not completely, but enough to imagine a future where trust might rebuild. The forgiveness felt fragile and conditional, dependent on him continuing to respect my boundaries and prove his growth. But it existed, small and tentative, where months ago there'd been only rage. My therapist suggested an exercise during our next session. Write a letter to Rachel expressing all the anger and pain her actions caused, everything I'd never gotten to say directly. The letter would never be sent, never read by anyone but me. Just a tool for processing and release. I spent 3 days working on it, filling page after page with rage and hurt and questions that would never be answered. Why did you hate me so much? What did I ever do to deserve your cruelty? How could you try to destroy an innocent person over your own grief? The words poured out uncensored, all the venom I'd been swallowing for months. When I finished, the letter was 7 pages long, my handwriting getting messier as the emotions intensified. My therapist had me read it aloud in our session, my voice shaking through certain passages. Then she suggested I burn it. Let the physical destruction of those words represent letting go. That evening, Kevin took our daughter for a walk while I knelt by our fireplace. I fed the pages into the flames one at a time, watching my anger curl and blacken and disappear up the chimney. Burning the letter felt weirdly powerful, like I was choosing to release the hold Rachel's actions had on my daily thoughts. Letting go of the rage didn't mean forgetting what happened or excusing her behavior. It meant the trauma no longer controlled every moment of my life. I could think about other things now without Rachel's cruelty invading every quiet moment. Dr. Dove cleared me at my 9-month postpartum checkup. My blood pressure was normal, back to pre-pregnancy levels. Physically, I'd recovered from the traumatic delivery. my body healing all the damage that crisis had caused. She asked about my mental health during the exam, her hand gentle on my shoulder. I was honest that I was still in therapy, still working through PTSD symptoms, but doing much better than I'd been months ago. The panic attacks were less frequent. The nightmares happened maybe once a week instead of nightly. I was functioning, taking care of my daughter, slowly rebuilding my marriage. Dr. Dove pulled me into a hug after the appointment, told me she was proud of how far I'd come. She'd been worried during those scary weeks of bed rest and emergency delivery that I might not survive the combined physical and emotional trauma. Seeing me healthy and coping well brought her genuine relief. Walking out of her office that day, I felt something close to pride in myself. I'd survived something designed to destroy me, and I was still standing. Kevin's father called me a few days later asking to meet for coffee. We sat in a quiet corner booth while my daughter napped in her stroller beside us. He wanted to set up a college fund for her, invest money now that would grow over the years, and give her opportunities when she was older. His way of making amends for the family's failures, for not seeing how Rachel treated me, for the years of enabling her cruel behavior. I accepted gratefully, recognizing that some family members were genuinely trying to repair the damage their blindness had caused. Not everyone enabled Rachel's behavior knowingly. Kevin's father admitted he'd made excuses for his daughter's difficult personality for decades, written off her cruelty as sensitivity or complicated feelings. He saw now how dangerous that enabling had been, how it allowed Rachel's mental illness to fester untreated until she nearly destroyed innocent people. His accountability meant something to me. It didn't erase what happened, but it showed that growth was possible even for people who'd failed me badly. He promised to be a better grandfather than he'd been a father-in-law, to protect my daughter from family dysfunction instead of pretending it didn't exist. After 10 months of sleeping separately, I told Kevin he could move back into our bedroom on a trial basis. The words came out nervous, uncertain if I was ready but willing to try. He moved his things back that evening, careful not to take up too much space, asking where I wanted him to put his books and clothes. The physical intimacy was awkward at first, both of us hyper-aware of the other person in bed after months of sleeping alone. We didn't have sex for the first 2 weeks, just shared the space, adjusted to each other's presence again. When we finally did attempt intimacy, it felt strange and forced, both of us trying too hard to make it feel natural. Our therapist reminded us that rebuilding took time, and setbacks were normal after trauma this severe. We didn't have to rush physical reconnection or force it to happen before we were ready. Some nights I'd wake up panicking and need Kevin to move to the guest room. Other nights I'd reach for him in the dark, needing the comfort of his presence. Both responses were okay. I was willing to keep trying because I saw his genuine effort to change, to become the husband I needed him to be, rather than the one he'd been before. Marlena came over for coffee one morning while Kevin was at work. She bounced my daughter on her knee, making faces that sent the baby into giggles. Then she told me she'd noticed a huge difference in how Kevin treated me now compared to before the accusations. He checked in about my feelings constantly. He respected my boundaries without resentment. He stood up to his family when they made unreasonable requests, or tried to pressure me about Rachel. The growth was real and observable, not just performative changes to win me back. Marlena said she'd been skeptical at first that Kevin could truly change after enabling Rachel for so many years. But watching him over these months, she believed his transformation was genuine. He'd done the hard work in therapy, examined his own failures, taken real accountability instead of just apologizing. That outside validation from someone who knew us both well helped me trust him again. If Marlena could see the difference, it wasn't just my hope making me see changes that didn't exist. Kevin was becoming a better partner, slowly and imperfectly, but consistently moving in the right direction. I watched my daughter play with her blocks on the living room floor, stacking them carefully before knocking them down with a squeal of joy. Kevin sat next to her, encouraging her attempts to build towers. She grabbed a red block and held it up toward him, babbling in her baby language. Then she said it clearly, unmistakably. Dada. Kevin froze. His eyes went wide and filled with tears instantly. He looked at me to confirm he'd heard correctly. I nodded, smiling despite the complicated emotions swirling through me. Our daughter said it again, louder this time, proud of herself. Dada, Dada. Kevin scooped her up and held her close, crying openly now. He pressed kisses to her forehead and told her over and over how much he loved her. She giggled and patted his wet cheeks with her small hands. I felt genuine happiness watching them together. He never took for granted that he got to be part of her life, that he got to hear her first word. The accusations could have destroyed us completely, but we were still here, still surviving. The grocery store was crowded on Saturday morning. I pushed my cart through the produce section, picking out apples and checking them for bruises. Someone touched my arm gently. I turned to find a woman I vaguely recognized, her face anxious and apologetic. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said quietly. "I'm Sarah. I lived next door to Rachel." My stomach dropped. This was the woman who told police she saw me at Rachel's house, the false witness who nearly destroyed my life. "I know who you are." My voice came out cold. "Please, I need to tell you something." She looked around nervously. Rachel lied to me. She manipulated me into saying I saw you. She showed me your photo and kept asking if that was the woman I saw at her door. I told her I wasn't sure, that I only saw someone pregnant from behind. But she kept insisting it was you, telling me how dangerous you were, how you'd threatened her baby. I stood there holding an apple, processing this. She made it sound so urgent, Sarah continued. Said you might hurt other people if I didn't confirm it was you. I thought I was helping. I'm so sorry. When I found out what really happened, that she fabricated everything, I felt sick. The anger I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt tired. This woman was another person Rachel had used and discarded. She was good at manipulation, I said finally. She fooled a lot of people. I should have been more careful. I should have insisted I couldn't identify anyone. The guilt has been eating me alive. Sarah's eyes were red. I nearly helped put an innocent woman in jail. You were a victim too, I told her. Rachel knew exactly how to pressure people into giving her what she wanted. Sarah thanked me multiple times before walking away. The conversation brought unexpected closure. Not everyone who hurt me had done it out of malice. Some were just caught in Rachel's web. Kevin ordered Thai food for our anniversary, spreading containers across our coffee table after our daughter finally fell asleep. 5 years of marriage, 1 year of hell. But we were still here, sitting together on our couch. This past year was the hardest thing we've ever been through, Kevin said. He picked at his pad thai. I failed you in so many ways. You did, I agreed. No point in softening it. But we're building something different now. Something stronger. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I wanted to get you something that represents where we are now, not where we were. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant. Our daughter's birthstone, a deep blue topaz. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely loving it. He'd put thought into this, chosen something meaningful rather than expensive. Kevin fastened it around my neck. His hands lingered on my shoulders for a moment. We ate our takeout and talked about normal things. Our daughter's new words, the leak in the bathroom sink, his mother's upcoming birthday. Small talk felt good after months of heavy conversations about trauma and therapy and restraining orders. Marlena called me Tuesday afternoon while I was folding laundry. The support group wanted me to speak at a legal advocacy event next month. They were hosting a panel about false accusations and the importance of thorough investigation before charging people with crimes. You don't have to, Marlena said, but they think your story could help prevent other innocent people from going through what you did. My hands shook slightly, folding one of my daughter's tiny shirts. The idea of standing in front of strangers and talking about the worst experience of my life terrified me, but I thought about other women who might face false accusations, who might not have the resources or support I'd had. I'll do it, I said. The event took place in a hotel conference room downtown. I sat backstage with the other panelists, my notes trembling in my hands. Kevin sat in the front row holding our daughter, who was miraculously behaving. Seeing them there calmed me slightly. When my turn came, I walked to the microphone and told my story. The cruel comments about my miscarriage, the stillbirth, the fabricated evidence, the moment I realized I was framed. I kept my voice steady, focusing on the facts rather than the emotions. The audience listened in complete silence. Afterward, several people approached me. A law student writing her thesis on false accusations, a woman whose sister had been wrongly charged with child abuse, a prosecutor who promised to remember my story when evaluating evidence in future cases. The exhaustion was worth it. Evelyn called 3 weeks later. Rachel's treatment team wanted to know if I'd participate in a mediated conversation as part of her recovery program. They thought it would help Rachel take full accountability and help me find closure. I hung up and immediately called my therapist. We spent an entire session discussing whether I was strong enough for this, whether facing Rachel would help or hurt my healing. My therapist asked what I hoped to gain from the conversation. I want to hear her admit what she did, I said. Not through lawyers or her mother, directly to me. We decided I was finally ready, with careful conditions. Both our therapists would be present. The session would be recorded. I could leave at any time. Rachel had to follow specific guidelines about taking responsibility without making excuses. The mediation center was a bland office building with beige walls and uncomfortable chairs. I arrived early with my therapist, my heart pounding. Kevin offered to come, but I told him this was something I needed to do alone. Rachel walked in looking nothing like the woman who'd tormented me. She'd lost weight, her face gaunt and pale. Her hands shook as she sat down across from me. Her therapist sat next to her, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. Thank you for agreeing to this, Rachel's therapist said. Rachel has prepared some things she wants to say. Rachel looked at me, then down at her hands. When she spoke, her voice was flat, almost robotic. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I fabricated evidence. I lied to police. I tried to have you arrested for something you didn't do. My actions were wrong and caused you immense harm. The words sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced them 100 times. I waited for more, for some explanation that would help me understand. Why did you target me? I asked. Why were you so cruel about my miscarriage? Why try to destroy my life? Rachel struggled to answer. She opened her mouth several times before words came out. I was jealous. You had everything I wanted. Kevin chose you over his family. You got pregnant again after your loss, and I was stuck with my grief. When I lost my baby, something broke inside me. I blamed you for having what I couldn't. That doesn't explain the cruelty, I pressed. The comments about my dead baby, telling me my body rejected it, that I wasn't meant to be a mother. I wanted you to hurt like I was hurting. Rachel's voice cracked slightly. I wanted to take away your happiness because mine was gone. The conversation didn't provide the catharsis I'd hoped for. Rachel's answers felt incomplete, her remorse forced, but I confirmed what I needed to know. She was no longer an active threat. The medication and therapy had stabilized her enough that she understood her actions were wrong, even if she couldn't fully articulate why she'd done them. I met with Evelyn the next day at her office. The mediation had left me feeling empty rather than relieved. I want to keep the restraining order in place, I told her, permanently. Evelyn nodded like she'd expected this. Rachel's progress doesn't obligate you to allow her back into your life. My safety matters more than her recovery, I said firmly. My daughter's safety matters more. Agreed. Evelyn pulled out paperwork. We'll file to make the order permanent with provisions for supervised contact only if you ever choose to allow it, which you're under no obligation to do. She filed everything that afternoon. The permanent restraining order meant Rachel could never approach me, my daughter, or my home without facing immediate legal consequences. The relief was profound. My daughter took her first steps 2 weeks before her first birthday. I was sitting on the floor folding laundry when she pulled herself up using the couch. She stood there wobbling, then let go. Kevin was across the room and saw her standing independently. Look, he whispered. Our daughter took one shaky step toward me, then another, then 3 more before falling into my arms. We both cheered and cried. She looked confused by our excitement, but clapped her hands anyway, proud of herself. Kevin scooped us both up in a hug. I was overwhelmed with gratitude that we'd made it to this moment. Rachel's accusations could have prevented me from seeing this, from being here to catch my daughter's first steps. But we'd survived. We were a family. Carol called in early December asking about Christmas plans. The family wanted to do a big gathering this year. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. Would you consider letting Rachel come? She's doing so much better. I'd make sure she stayed on the other side of the room. You wouldn't have to interact at all. No. My answer was immediate and firm. Honey, it's been over a year. She's gotten help. The family misses having everyone together. I won't attend any event where Rachel is present, I said clearly. Ever. That's not negotiable. Carol was quiet for a long moment. I understand. I'll see Rachel separately then. You and Kevin and the baby are my priority. The boundary held. Carol accepted it sadly but respectfully. She'd see Rachel for lunch the day after Christmas, keeping the celebrations completely separate. I appreciated that she didn't push or try to guilt me into changing my mind. My final intensive therapy session happened on a cold January morning. 14 months of weekly appointments, homework assignments, coping strategies, and processing trauma. My therapist reviewed my progress, noting how far I'd come from the terrified woman who first walked into her office. You've developed strong skills for managing triggers, she said. The nightmares have decreased significantly. You're functioning well in daily life. I still have bad days, I admitted. That's normal. PTSD doesn't disappear completely, but you're no longer in crisis mode. She smiled. You've done remarkable work. We scheduled monthly maintenance sessions going forward. I didn't need intensive treatment anymore, but I wanted to keep checking in, keep working on my healing. The trauma was part of my history now, but it wasn't my entire identity. I was a mother, a wife, a survivor. I was building a life beyond what Rachel had tried to destroy. Kevin brought up trying for another baby during one of our therapy sessions. Our therapist asked if we both felt ready. I looked at my daughter playing with blocks in the corner of the office. She was healthy and happy and loved. The thought of another pregnancy didn't fill me with fear anymore. Kevin reached for my hand. We talked about it for weeks after that session. Late-night conversations after our daughter went to sleep. He asked if I was truly ready or just trying to make him happy. I told him I wanted our daughter to have a sibling, someone to grow up with. The decision felt right instead of scary. We stopped preventing pregnancy that month. 3 months later, I took a test and saw 2 pink lines. This time I cried from joy instead of terror. Kevin held me and promised he'd be better this time. Doctor Dove saw me for my first appointment at 6 weeks. She asked how I was feeling emotionally. I told her I was nervous but excited. She monitored me closely because of my history. Weekly appointments instead of monthly. Blood pressure checks every visit. But everything looked perfect. The pregnancy was completely normal. No complications. No scares. Kevin came to every single appointment. He asked questions and took notes. Held my hand during ultrasounds. This was different from my first pregnancy when he'd been distracted by work and family drama. He'd learned from his mistakes. My daughter turned 2 years old on a sunny Saturday in May. We threw a big party in our backyard with streamers and balloons. Friends came with their kids. Carol brought a huge cake decorated with butterflies. Marlena showed up with presents and spent the afternoon chasing toddlers around the yard. And I stood by the fence watching my daughter play with other children. She was laughing and running and completely unaware of everything that happened before she was born, the darkness that nearly destroyed our family. She was just a happy 2-year-old eating cake and opening presents. Kevin wrapped his arms around me from behind. His hands rested on my growing belly. We'd announced the new pregnancy at the party. Everyone was excited for us. I felt peace watching our daughter blow out her candles. She was safe and loved, and that was everything I'd fought for. The letter came 2 weeks later. Evelyn called me when it arrived at her office. Rachel's lawyer had sent a formal request asking if Rachel could send birthday gifts to my daughter. I drove to Evelyn's office to read it myself. The letter was carefully worded. Rachel acknowledged she had no right to contact me directly. She understood the restraining order would remain in place, but she wanted to send presents for birthdays and holidays. Small things to show she was thinking of her niece. I read it twice. Then I told Evelyn no. Rachel had no place in our lives. Not now, not ever. I didn't care if she was doing better or felt remorse. She'd tried to destroy me while I was pregnant, framed me for killing her baby, put me through hell. Kevin agreed completely when I told him that night. He said protecting me and our children came before his sister's feelings. He'd finally accepted that Rachel was dangerous. Evelyn sent the response the next day, clear and firm. No contact, no gifts, no involvement in our lives whatsoever. Kevin's father died 3 months later. Heart attack at 62. Sudden and shocking. Carol called us at 6 in the morning crying. Kevin drove us to his parents' house immediately. The family gathered there throughout the day, making arrangements, calling relatives, supporting Carol. I was 7 months pregnant and exhausted. Then Rachel walked through the door. She looked thin and tired. Her eyes found mine across the room. I moved to the opposite side immediately. Kevin noticed and stayed between us. He ran interference all day, positioning himself so Rachel couldn't approach me. When she tried to come near me in the kitchen, he blocked her path, told her firmly to stay away. His protection during that vulnerable time showed how much he'd changed. The funeral was 3 days later. I stayed on one side of the church. Rachel sat on the other. Kevin's hand stayed on my back the entire service, ready to move me if Rachel came close. She didn't try, just watched us from across the room. I saw her staring at my pregnant belly, the same belly she'd accused of carrying a child I'd supposedly protect by destroying hers. Carol held my hand during the burial. She'd made her choice. She supported me and our children. Rachel would have to grieve her father separately. I went into labor 5 weeks later at 39 weeks. The contractions started at 2 in the morning. Kevin drove me to the hospital calmly. Dr. Dove met us there. The delivery was smooth and uncomplicated. Nothing like my daughter's traumatic birth. No blood pressure spikes, no emergency interventions, just normal labor that progressed steadily. Kevin stayed by my side the entire time, held my hand, wiped my face, encouraged me through every contraction. Our son was born at 10:30 in the morning, 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Healthy lungs that announced his arrival loudly. The nurses placed him on my chest. Kevin cut the cord with tears streaming down his face. I held my son and felt overwhelming gratitude. Rachel's attempt to destroy me had failed completely. She'd tried to take everything from me. But here I was with a healthy baby boy and a toddler daughter at home. Our family was whole and happy and growing. Kevin kissed my forehead, whispered that he loved me, that he was proud of me, that we'd made it through hell together. Carol came to visit when we brought our son home. She held him carefully and cried happy tears. My daughter climbed onto the couch to see her baby brother. Carol watched them together. Then she asked if she could have a relationship with both grandchildren and Rachel separately, never mixing the two. She'd see Rachel alone for supervised visits, but she wanted to be involved with my children, attend birthdays and holidays, babysit when we needed help. I thought about it carefully. Carol had respected every boundary I'd set. She'd supported my healing, chosen me over Rachel when it mattered. I agreed to the arrangement. She could see Rachel on her own time, but my children would never be in the same room as Rachel. Carol hugged me carefully, thanked me for trusting her. She became a constant presence in our lives after that, coming over twice a week, taking my daughter to the park, holding my son while I napped. She kept her promise, never mentioned Rachel around us, never pushed for reconciliation. 2 years after the accusations, Kevin suggested renewing our wedding vows. He wanted to celebrate the stronger marriage we'd built through crisis and therapy. I liked the idea, a way to acknowledge how far we'd come. We planned a small ceremony in our backyard, just close friends and family. Marlena helped me pick a simple white dress. Carol watched the kids while we prepared. The ceremony happened on a warm June afternoon. Our daughter was 4 years old. Our son was 2. They played at our feet while we stood under an arch decorated with flowers. Kevin went first. His vows talked about failing me, about learning to be the husband I deserved, about choosing me every single day. I cried listening to him. Then I spoke. My vows acknowledged the pain we'd survived, the growth we'd achieved together, the family we'd built from ashes. Our therapist attended and smiled watching us. We'd done the work, faced the hard truths, rebuilt something stronger. Kevin kissed me when we finished. Our children clapped, not understanding, but happy to see us happy. Marlena took photos of our family, the 4 of us together, smiling and whole. My support group leader called me 6 months later. She asked if I'd be interested in becoming a peer counselor, using my experience to help others navigate similar trauma, falsely accused individuals who needed someone who understood. I thought about how isolated I'd felt during the investigation, how desperate I'd been for someone who'd survived what I was going through. I told her yes. Kevin was enthusiastic when I explained it. He said he'd watch the kids during training sessions and support meetings. I started the training program that fall, learning how to provide peer support without trying to fix everything, how to listen and validate and share resources. The work felt meaningful and purposeful, turning my trauma into something that could help others. I met people going through their own nightmares, offered hope that they could survive, that life could be good again on the other side. Carol told me 6 months after that Rachel had completed her outpatient treatment program. She was moving to a different state for a fresh start. Vikram had shared through Carol that Rachel finally expressed genuine remorse. She acknowledged she'd nearly destroyed an innocent person's life, understood the severity of what she'd done. I listened to Carol tell me this, appreciated hearing that Rachel had grown, but I maintained that she'd never be part of my life regardless. Some bridges were burned beyond repair. Some damage couldn't be fixed with apologies and therapy. Rachel could build a new life somewhere else, find peace and healing on her own, but she'd never have access to me or my children. Carol understood, said she respected my decision completely. Rachel moved to Colorado 2 weeks later. I didn't ask for details, didn't want to know where exactly or what she was doing. She was gone from our lives. That was enough. I dropped off Judith at her preschool classroom on a Tuesday morning in September, watching her run toward the art station without looking back. She wore her new backpack decorated with butterflies and carried the lunch I'd packed that morning. The teacher smiled and waved me away when I hesitated at the door. My son Ryan sat in his stroller beside me, chewing on a teething ring and kicking his feet. He'd turned 1 last month with a small party in our backyard. Kevin had taken the day off work to be there for Judith's first day, but a work emergency pulled him away at the last minute. I texted him a photo of Judith at her cubby, already making friends with another girl. He responded immediately with heart emojis and promised to pick her up that afternoon. Walking back to the car, I thought about how normal this felt, how ordinary and beautiful and safe. 3 years ago, I'd been terrified the police would arrest me before I could deliver my baby. Now I was a preschool mom worried about whether Judith would eat her vegetables at lunch. Kevin and I still saw our therapist once a month for maintenance sessions, checking in on our communication and making sure we stayed connected. Last week, we talked about Judith starting school and how to handle the inevitable questions from other parents about family dynamics. We'd practiced responses together, deciding what felt comfortable to share. The tools we'd learned during the crisis years had become habits now. Kevin asked before making plans with his family. I spoke up immediately when something bothered me instead of letting resentment build. We scheduled regular date nights and protected that time fiercely. Our marriage felt solid in a way it never had before we almost lost everything. The trauma had forced us to rebuild from the foundation up, and what we'd created together was stronger than what we'd started with. 3 years after Rachel's accusations, I stood at our kitchen window watching my children play in the backyard. Judith pushed Ryan on the baby swing Kevin had installed last spring. She sang to him while he laughed and reached for her hair. Kevin stood at the grill flipping burgers for dinner, occasionally looking over at the kids and smiling. The late afternoon sun made everything golden and warm. I still had nightmares sometimes where Detective Jason was at my door with handcuffs. I still tensed when my phone rang from unknown numbers. Certain phrases could trigger panic attacks that left me shaking and breathless, but those moments no longer controlled my daily life. I'd survived something that should have destroyed me. I'd been falsely accused of killing a baby while carrying my own child. My husband had doubted me. My family had turned against me. The legal system had treated me like a criminal. And I'd fought through all of it to protect my daughter and prove my innocence. The scars would always be there. I'd never forget the terror of those months, or the betrayal of Kevin's initial doubt. But I'd also discovered strength I never knew I had. I'd learned to fight for my truth when everyone else believed lies. I'd rebuilt my marriage into something real and honest. I'd created a safe, loving home for my children where they could grow up protected from the darkness that had tried to consume us. Rachel lived somewhere in Colorado now, building whatever life she could after everything she'd done. I didn't think about her often anymore. She'd lost her power over me when I stopped letting her actions define my worth. Kevin called that dinner was ready, and Judith came running with Ryan toddling behind her. We sat together at the patio table, our family of 4, eating and laughing and making plans for the weekend. This life, this joy, this peace had been hard won. Every moment felt precious because I knew how close I'd come to losing it all.